Hi, I'm Emily. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one everyone turned to when it came to money, planning, or just making sure things didn't fall apart. My parents built a family trust over decades, years of careful work, smart investments, and sacrifices they made to secure our future. When they handed me the responsibility of managing it, I took it seriously. I thought I understood my family. I thought I knew my brother. I was wrong. Ryan, my younger brother by 3 years, had always been reckless. Charming, impulsive, and endlessly confident, he had this way of making people believe in him, even when logic screamed otherwise. He was also stubborn, the kind of person who thought rules didn't apply to him. And that day, he walked into my office and proved it in the most shocking way possible. "Emily," he said, leaning casually against the edge of my desk, a smug smile playing on his lips, "I need $1.5 million from the trust. It's for my startup. You're the only one who can make this happen." I froze, my heart pounding. $1.5 million. From the trust I was supposed to protect. My brain raced, calculating, questioning, refusing to believe he could even ask such a thing. "Ryan, I can't," I said finally, my voice calm but firm, trying to mask the shock. "The trust isn't for personal ventures. It's for family security for the future, you know that." He laughed, but it wasn't the light-hearted laugh I remembered from childhood. It was sharp, bitter, almost a little dangerous. "You always have to play the responsible one, huh?" he said, stepping closer. "This could change everything for me. You could make me a millionaire overnight, and you're saying no." I took a deep breath. I knew Ryan didn't take no well. "I'm saying no because it's not responsible. This isn't just about you. There are rules, and you're asking me to break them. I can't do that." His face darkened, the playful charm slipping away, replaced by something harder, colder. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he hissed. "Always the smart one, always the perfect sister. But I won't forget this. You're standing in my way, Emily, and one day you're going to regret it." I felt a chill. I had expected disappointment, maybe even anger, but not this veiled threat. My brother, the person I trusted, was already making it personal. I didn't realize it then, but this was the moment everything changed. This wasn't just about $1.5 million anymore. It was about power, control, and the lengths someone close to you might go when they feel entitled. I stood my ground, my heart racing, my mind already analyzing. I needed to be careful, strategic, and patient. Ryan was impulsive, yes, but he was also manipulative. And as much as I hated to admit it, he was dangerous when cornered. That day, as he stormed out of my office with a final glare, I sat back in my chair, feeling a mixture of fear, anger, and determination. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let him take what wasn't his. And I also knew that my refusal had set something in motion, something I couldn't yet fully see, but would soon feel in every interaction, every phone call, and every meeting. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long, tense battle, one that would test my patience, my intelligence, and my ability to protect not just the trust, but myself. My brother had just demanded $1.5 million from me, and in saying no, I had lit a fire that neither of us would be able to ignore. After that day in my office, I thought Ryan might back off. I really did. I hoped that my refusal would make him pause and maybe reflect on what he was asking. $1.5 million wasn't a small amount. But within days, it became clear that this wasn't just a simple disagreement. This was war, and he had decided I was the enemy. It started with little things. At first, I brushed them off as coincidences, a misdirected email here, a slightly strange response from a business contact there. But soon, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Investors I had trusted for years suddenly seemed hesitant, distracted, or vague during conversations. Friends called, asking if I was really being fair to Ryan. At first, I thought it was just gossip. Then I realized it was Ryan had begun quietly undermining me. He was careful, subtle, almost surgical. Nothing could be pinned directly on him, but the effect was clear. He was eroding my reputation, trying to make me look unreasonable or selfish. And he didn't even try to hide it. The messages, the whispers at family gatherings, the sly comments, they all pointed to the same conclusion. Ryan was not going to let me say no without a fight. I remember one evening clearly. I was at a dinner with my parents and a few extended family members. Ryan arrived late, as usual, and within minutes he was planting little seeds. "Emily, been so protective of the trust," he said casually, smiling at my parents. "It's almost like she doesn't trust anyone in the family to make a smart decision. I guess some people are just overly cautious." I felt the tension immediately. My parents exchanged awkward glances, unsure what to say. Ryan continued, effortless and charming. "I just want to take a chance, you know. If Emily supported me, this could be incredible." I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. But inside, my blood was boiling. The audacity of him, twisting the story, making it seem like I was the villain, was infuriating. And it was working. I could feel eyes flicking to me, questioning, doubting. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my study, reviewing emails and notes from the past week. I realized I needed to take action, quietly, carefully, without letting him know I was onto him. If I reacted emotionally, I would only give him ammunition. I started documenting everything. Every suspicious email, every odd meeting, every casual conversation that hinted at manipulation. I labeled them with dates, times, and context. I began tracking his movements and interactions with business contacts. I needed a full picture, something undeniable if I ever had to confront him. But it wasn't just business, it was personal. Ryan had always been competitive, but now it felt like he wanted to hurt me. Every interaction, every dinner, every call was a test of patience, a subtle battle of wills. I could sense that he was enjoying the tension, watching to see if I would crack. And I realized something else. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about power, control, and proving who was right. He wanted to humiliate me, to make me look small in front of the family and everyone who mattered. I promised myself that I wouldn't let him win. Not this time. I would remain calm, patient, and meticulous. I would plan every move like a chess game, anticipating his strategies, setting my defenses, and preparing for the moment I could strike back. That night, I sat back in my chair, staring at the city skyline through my office window. Ryan thought he could get under my skin, but he had no idea what he was up against. I wasn't just the responsible sister. I was someone who knew how to fight when cornered. And this fight was just beginning. I thought I had prepared myself for Ryan's next move, but nothing could have prepared me for the first real blow. I knew he was manipulative. I knew he was reckless. But I didn't realize just how far he would go or how public he would make his attack. It started with a message from one of my longtime investors. The subject line alone made my stomach drop. "We need to talk about Ryan and the trust." I opened it carefully, my hands trembling. The email detailed that Ryan had been speaking to several investors, twisting the story, painting me as the villain who refused to support family and innovation. He claimed that if I had only backed his startup, none of the recent problems would have happened. At first, I thought I could ignore it. After all, I had documented everything. But then came the phone calls. Friends, business associates, even distant relatives began calling with cautious, hesitant voices. Some asked if I was really being fair to Ryan. Others offered advice on how to handle him, often implying I had mishandled the situation. Even casual acquaintances began asking questions about my judgment. It felt like a wave crashing over me, eroding the reputation I had spent years building. And the worst part? Ryan was smiling somewhere, probably thinking he had won. I remember sitting in my office that evening, staring at my laptop screen, feeling my confidence shake. I had always been the calm, rational one, the sister everyone relied on. And yet here I was, watching the consequences of a refusal, consequences that weren't even my fault, unfold before me. I felt anger, frustration, and a rising panic. But beneath it all, a small voice inside reminded me, this is exactly what he wants. I took a deep breath and forced myself to step back. I couldn't react emotionally. If I did, I would play right into his hands. Instead, I began strategizing, reviewing the documentation I had already started in part 2. Every email, every rumor, every subtle attempt at manipulation, I had it all recorded. Now, it wasn't just for my own protection. It was going to be my shield, and eventually my weapon. Over the next few days, Ryan doubled down. He posted about his startup online, painting me as an obstacle to his genius. He spoke to family members, planting more seeds of doubt. Each interaction was calculated to provoke me, to make me question my decisions. I noticed the pattern. The more I stayed calm and composed, the more reckless he became. He thought he was winning, but in reality, he was walking right into the trap I was setting. Each lie he told, each story he exaggerated, was a piece of evidence I was quietly collecting. But even as I planned, the emotional toll was real. I felt betrayed, hurt, and frustrated by my own brother. Family is supposed to be a safe place, a source of love and support. But here I was, feeling like I had to fight for survival within my own family. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. One night, after another tense call with an investor questioning my decision-making, I sat in my study, staring at the city lights outside my window. I realized something important. Ryan's attacks were reckless but predictable. He thrived on chaos and emotion, whereas I had patience, strategy, and preparation on my side. I promised myself something then, a silent vow that I would not let him control me or my life. If he wanted a battle, I would give him one, but on my terms. I would wait, observe, and strike at the right moment. That night, I felt a strange combination of exhaustion and determination. The first blow had landed, and yes, it hurt, but it also awakened something in me. I wasn't just fighting for money or reputation. I was fighting to prove that integrity and strategy could withstand manipulation and deceit. And the moment Ryan realized that, the real reckoning would begin. After the first public attack, I knew I couldn't just react anymore. Reacting would play right into Ryan's hands. I needed a plan. I needed precision. I needed patience. And above all, I needed to stay calm while he continued to spiral recklessly. I started by analyzing everything he had done so far. Every investor he misled, every rumor he planted, every sly comment to family, I mapped it all out. I created a timeline, a strategy map, even noting the exact language he used. I realized something important. Ryan was predictable. His arrogance made him careless. The more I documented, the more I could see the openings he didn't even know he was leaving. Next, I focused on the trust itself. I consulted with our family lawyers and financial advisors, carefully reviewing all the documents, accounts, and protocols. I fortified protections, tightened oversight, and made sure there was no way for him to exploit any loopholes. Every penny, every asset, every decision he might try to influence was now securely under watch. He couldn't touch anything without leaving a trail, exactly the kind of trail I could use if the time came. I also began strengthening my network. I reached out quietly to family members I trusted, explaining the situation without exaggeration. I wanted allies who could see the truth, people who could support me if Ryan tried to escalate further. I knew some relatives might be swayed by his charm, so I made sure they had the facts documented, undeniable, and unemotional. At the same time, I monitored Ryan closely. Social media posts, investor updates, casual mentions at family gatherings, everything became intelligence. I even started tracking patterns in his communications. It was almost like playing chess. I had to anticipate not just the next move, but the next 3 moves after that. And yet, amidst all this planning, I had to maintain my composure. That was the hardest part. Ryan wanted to see me crack, to show him I was rattled, emotional, or desperate. But every time he made a careless public comment, every time he exaggerated his failures or blamed me for his missteps, I reminded myself, patience is power. One evening, I reviewed everything I had collected. Emails, investor notes, screenshots, and financial data filled my desk. I realized something. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was preparing for the moment I could turn the tables. Every reckless move Ryan made, every lie he told, every attempt to manipulate the trust or our family was being recorded. And one day, all of it would work in my favor. Even as I strategized, Ryan continued his reckless behavior. He publicly exaggerated his startup's progress and subtly hinted at my lack of support in private conversations. He thought he was still ahead, but in reality, he was walking directly into the trap I was carefully constructing. The most important part of my plan, though, was restraint. I couldn't strike too early. I couldn't let him see that I was aware. I had to wait until he overstepped, until his arrogance and impulsiveness exposed him fully. And when that moment came, I would have everything I needed to turn the situation around legally, financially, and socially. But even as I planned my moves, the emotional toll weighed heavily. I felt betrayed by my own brother, frustrated by the erosion of trust in my family, and sometimes exhausted by the constant vigilance required. Yet, beneath all that, a quiet determination grew. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to ensure that Ryan faced the consequences of his recklessness in a way he never expected. That night, I stayed late in my office, reviewing my notes, making final adjustments to my strategy, and imagining the moment when everything would fall into place. Ryan thought he had the upper hand, that his charm and aggressiveness could intimidate me. He had no idea that the real battle had just begun, and that I was the one controlling the board. I went to bed that night with a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. For the first time since this all began, I felt truly in control. The first blows had landed, and the pieces were set. Now, all I had to do was wait for Ryan to make his next mistake, and when he did, I would be ready. It wasn't long before Ryan made his next move. I had anticipated it, of course. Every reckless, arrogant move he made had a predictable pattern. But seeing it unfold in real life was something else entirely. He tried to exploit a minor loophole in the trust documents, thinking he could pressure me into giving him access to funds. He reached out to a few family members, trying to sway them to his side. He even contacted investors, claiming I was obstructing innovation and family progress. He believed he was clever, thinking no one could see through his schemes. I watched it all carefully, quietly, almost like observing a storm brewing. But instead of panicking, I smiled, because this time I was ready. I had set a small, controlled trap. Using the documentation I had collected, emails, messages, financial notes, and witness accounts, I created a situation where his recklessness would expose him fully. I didn't need to act immediately. I only needed to wait for him to step into the spotlight, make a move, and reveal his true nature. The moment came during a family meeting that Ryan had demanded. He thought he could present his case directly to my parents and a few influential relatives. He was confident, charming, and manipulative, the same way he always was when he wanted something. "Emily is standing in the way of something incredible," he said, leaning forward, eyes bright with self-assuredness. "If I had the support I deserve, this startup could change everything, but she refuses to see my vision." I let him speak. I stayed calm, neutral, almost disinterested. Every word he said was being recorded, every lie catalogued in my mind. I waited. Then the trap worked. A financial advisor, one of the people I had quietly briefed before the meeting, gently but firmly corrected Ryan in front of everyone. "Ryan, you do realize that your claims aren't accurate, right? The trust has always been protected against this type of investment, and Emily has followed every legal protocol to the letter." Ryan's face flushed, his charm slipping. "Well, that's technically true, but—" "No, it's more than true," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "Every claim you've made here today has been documented and verified. Your investors know it. Your family knows it. And every time you try to bypass the rules, it only exposes you further." I watched as the room shifted. Family members exchanged glances. Investors leaned forward, curiosity turning into concern. Ryan was visibly rattled, his confidence cracking under the weight of facts, documentation, and the calm authority I radiated. It was the first real crack in his carefully constructed facade. I had known it was coming, but watching him falter, hearing him stumble over words he usually wielded with such confidence, was strangely satisfying. Not out of cruelty, but because for the first time, truth had started to prevail over manipulation. After that day, Ryan's reckless moves became even more apparent. He continued to post updates about his startup, trying to recover his image, but every exaggeration, every false claim, only added to the evidence I had been collecting. That night, as I reviewed my notes and watched the emails and messages pour in from allies quietly confirming my side, I realized something. The trap had worked. Ryan had shown his hand, and the pieces of his recklessness were now visible to everyone who mattered. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. This was only the first stage. The next step would be exposing him fully, making sure his lies and manipulations could no longer hide in the shadows. And for that, I needed patience, strategy, and a clear plan. I went to bed that night exhausted but focused. Ryan thought he was ahead, but in reality, he was walking deeper into a storm I had been quietly orchestrating. And when the final reckoning came, it wouldn't just be a minor defeat, it would be a complete exposure of everything he had tried to hide. For the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet sense of control. The first real move of my revenge had begun, and I was ready to see it through to the very end. After the trap worked and Ryan stumbled in front of the family and investors, I knew the next step was crucial. One misstep, one emotional reaction, and all my planning could unravel. But I also knew that leaving him unchecked would only let him regroup, lie, and manipulate further. It was time to bring everything into the light, strategically, calmly, and with undeniable proof. I spent the next several days preparing. Every email, every text, every message from him to investors or family, every misrepresentation he had made, I compiled it all into a single, organized file. Nothing was exaggerated, nothing was left out. It was the truth laid bare, and it spoke louder than any argument I could make. Then came the meeting I had been waiting for, one of the largest gatherings of family, investors, and advisors Ryan had tried to manipulate. He walked in, full of swagger, unaware that I had spent days quietly preparing those who would witness his exposure. He started as usual, boasting about his vision, claiming I had obstructed his progress, and painting himself as the misunderstood genius. I listened, letting him finish, carefully noting his tone and arguments. Then, I calmly stood and addressed the room. Ryan has made several claims about the trust and his startup, I began, keeping my voice steady. I want to present the facts so that everyone can see the full picture. I displayed the documentation, emails, financial records, text messages, everything laid out in a chronological order that left no room for doubt. Each claim he had made was directly contradicted by evidence. Each story he had exaggerated or lied about was clearly disproven. Ryan's face paled as he realized what I was doing. "Emily, you don't have to," he started, but I held up a hand, continuing without pause. "This isn't about punishing you," I said firmly. "It's about clarity. It's about ensuring that the truth is seen and that the trust is protected. And unfortunately, your repeated manipulations and reckless decisions have made this necessary." I watched the reactions around the room. Family members exchanged astonished glances, realizing how carefully Ryan had been twisting the narrative. Investors leaned in, some shaking their heads, silently acknowledging the truth in front of them. Even a few of Ryan's allies, who had blindly supported him, began questioning what they had believed. Ryan tried to argue, to deflect, to charm his way out of it, but the evidence was too strong. Every attempt he made to spin the story only reinforced what I was showing, that he had acted recklessly, deceitfully, and without consideration for consequences. By the end of the meeting, Ryan's confidence had completely crumbled. He slouched, muttering under his breath, realizing that his carefully constructed image had been dismantled in front of everyone who mattered. I had anticipated this reaction, and I stayed composed, careful not to gloat, knowing that patience was still my ally. After the meeting, I received messages from several investors who thanked me for my transparency, and family members who apologized for doubting my judgment. It was a small but important victory. The first time the truth had truly prevailed in a way that Ryan couldn't manipulate or spin. That night, I sat alone in my office, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks. Ryan had tried to take control, to manipulate and discredit me. But every lie, every reckless move had been quietly documented, carefully prepared, and now exposed. I realized then that real-life revenge isn't about anger or spite. It's about strategy, patience, and letting someone's own actions lead them to their downfall. I didn't need to shout, threaten, or humiliate Ryan. The truth did all of that for me. Even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew the battle wasn't entirely over. Ryan would still be angry, still bitter, still desperate to recover whatever pride he could. But now he had nowhere to hide, and that knowledge gave me power. As I turned off the lights in my office and looked out over the city, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The storm I had been preparing for had begun to clear, and the path ahead was visible. Ryan had been exposed. The trust had been protected. And the next steps, the final reckoning, were within reach. Even after exposing Ryan publicly, I knew the hardest part was still ahead, confronting him directly. The meeting with family and investors had weakened his facade, but he was still dangerous. Anger, pride, and desperation can make people reckless, and I needed to face him carefully, strategically. The day came when he finally demanded a one-on-one meeting, claiming he needed to clear the air and salvage what was left of our relationship. I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted closure. I needed him to see, without any illusions, exactly what he had done and what the consequences were. We met in a neutral space, a quiet cafe downtown. He arrived first, looking tense but trying to maintain his usual charm. "Emily," he said, forcing a smile, "can we talk? I think we need to resolve this. For the family, for the trust, for us." I sat down across from him, calm, collected, my notebook tucked neatly in front of me. "Ryan," I said evenly, "this isn't about resolving anything. This is about accountability, and I think it's time you understand the full scope of your actions." His expression flickered, annoyance, frustration, and a trace of fear. He tried to interrupt, to charm, but I held up my hand. "No, you need to listen. I've documented everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every reckless attempt to take funds, to mislead investors, to twist family members against me. It's all here." I opened the notebook, flipping to the first page, and began recounting incidents, dates, messages, and events, one by one. Each story, each lie he had told was laid bare. At first, he tried to interrupt, tried to charm, tried to argue. But with each fact, each piece of evidence, his confidence waned. His excuses fell flat, his defenses crumbled, and I could see the realization slowly dawning. There was no spinning this story, no charming his way out. You've kept all this," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "I had to," I replied calmly, "because you've shown me that you can't be trusted to act responsibly, and now you're going to see the consequences of that." For a few moments, he simply stared at me, unable to form words. Then, almost bitterly, he said, "So this is your revenge. You've ruined me." I shook my head. "This isn't revenge, Ryan. This is accountability. This is you facing the truth about your actions. I didn't create this situation, you did. I just made sure that it was seen clearly so no one could be misled or hurt anymore." He looked away, defeated, the stubborn pride that had always defined him giving way to shame and frustration. For the first time, I saw him truly humbled, stripped of all the bravado and charm he had relied on for so long. I just wanted a chance," he muttered, almost inaudible. "You had a chance," I said firmly, "and you squandered it. Now you have to live with the consequences of your choices. I've protected the trust, the family, and the people who believed in you, but you have to rebuild your life honestly, without manipulation or shortcuts." The conversation ended there. He left, slamming the door softly behind him, and I sat alone for a moment, feeling a strange mixture of relief and lingering sorrow. Family betrayals cut deep, but seeing him face the truth without me having to yell, manipulate, or escalate brought a quiet sense of justice. That night, I reflected on the journey. The battle had been long, exhausting, and emotionally draining, but it had taught me something crucial. Integrity, patience, and careful planning are more powerful than anger or retaliation. I had protected what mattered most, and Ryan had been forced to confront the reality he had tried so hard to avoid. As I looked out my window at the city lights, I felt a sense of closure. The storm had passed, the pieces were in place, and the future, both for the trust and for myself, felt secure. Ryan would have to rebuild his life honestly, without shortcuts or manipulation. And I finally could breathe again, knowing that justice had been served in the most powerful way, through truth, patience, and unwavering resolve. The days after the final confrontation with Ryan were quiet, almost eerily so. I had expected tension, awkward glances at family gatherings, and perhaps even resentment. But something shifted. The truth had a way of settling things that lies never could. Slowly, I began to notice subtle changes, family members reaching out, investors expressing relief, and even friends who had been uncertain now showing support. I spent a lot of time reflecting. The experience had been exhausting, emotionally draining, and at times frightening. Watching someone you love manipulate, lie, and attempt to control everything around them is a unique kind of pain. But it also taught me something invaluable. Strength isn't about being aggressive or vengeful. Strength is about patience, clarity, and knowing when to act and when to wait. Ryan, meanwhile, was left to face the consequences of his actions. His startup continued to falter after the exposure, and his attempts to regain credibility were met with skepticism. I didn't need to ruin him, the truth had already done that. Every misstep he had taken, every lie he had told, every moment of reckless ambition had left a trail he could no longer hide. He had to rebuild, but now without the shortcuts, manipulations, or charm he had relied on for so long. As for me, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. I focused on the trust, ensuring it was secure and managed responsibly. I reached out to family members, rebuilding relationships that had been strained, offering understanding but also firm boundaries. And through it all, I realized something profound. The people who truly mattered respected honesty and integrity. The rest, those who believed Ryan's manipulations, were not worth the energy. I also learned the power of strategy. I had been patient, meticulous, and careful, planning each move with foresight. I had turned chaos into control, manipulation into clarity, and lies into evidence. The battle with Ryan was over, but the lessons I had learned would stay with me forever. Patience, preparation, and integrity, these were my greatest tools. There were moments of sadness, of course. Watching my brother fall from the image he had carefully built, knowing the consequences he now faced, was not easy. But I also understood that his downfall was not my revenge. It was the natural result of his own choices. I had merely allowed the truth to shine, giving him a chance to confront reality. And in that, there was a strange sense of justice, fair and precise, without cruelty. I started to feel a sense of pride, not in the defeat of my brother, but in my own resilience. I had faced betrayal, manipulation, and pressure from someone I loved. I had stayed calm when I could have panicked, strategic when I could have reacted emotionally, and patient when I could have lashed out. In the end, I realized that I had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident in my own judgment. Life went on, slowly and steadily. Ryan remained in my orbit, but now at a distance. He had to learn, the hard way, that actions have consequences, and I had finally found peace. I wasn't just managing a family trust anymore. I was managing my life, my choices, and my future with clarity and purpose. Looking back, I know I would make the same choices again. Saying no, standing firm, documenting every move, and trusting my instincts, those were the steps that saved me, protected the family, and preserved the trust. And sometimes I think that's what true strength looks like, not in confrontation, but in foresight, patience, and the courage to stand by your principles, no matter the cost. That chapter of my life closed not with bitterness, but with understanding, control, and a deep, quiet satisfaction. Ryan had learned his lessons. I had learned mine, and I was ready to face the future, stronger and wiser than I had ever been.